Because as soon as you do the should, you're either judging yourself or putting a judgment on other people, or having that whole internal external conflict of, oh, but I should be doing that, but it doesn't feel right for me, or I really want to do this, but I think I should do that because they said this. And so there's a lot of that sort of negative firing of judgment that comes with that word. So should is one of those words that we go, should, and then we throw it out the window, because otherwise you go, should do this, should do this, should do this. You're shoulding all over yourself. I'm in Melbourne, Australia, so that's known for having like 4 different seasons in a day. And so currently we sort of started the morning about 13 degrees Celsius, and we're going to head up to 33 degrees Celsius. The next few days are going to be 38, which I think is just around the 100 Fahrenheit, something like that, or just over. So we're having a little bit of a hot one at the moment, but we're in the middle of summer, so it comes and goes. Sometimes it's cooler, sometimes it's a little bit wet, sometimes it's windy and hot, and we just go with the flow down here in Melbourne, Australia. You get what you get.
Yes, that is so wild and just amazing to me that you can live through all those seasons, and just the fact that we're here right now, you're a whole day ahead of me, well, not a whole day, but
Yeah,
half a day ahead of me. Yeah, and, it's like we're time traveling. That is just so cool, and I'm
yeah,
so
I
honored
know. It's amazing.
to be able to talk to you. Oh, yeah, it really is. So yeah, thank you for making time for me and for our listeners, and, being so willing, especially on the weekends, to come and join us. I know we're recording now for those listening, so this will be much even more time travel in the future, or yeah, time travel. They'll be listening to us from the past. But I'm so excited to get to talk to you and just hear from all of your great insights into leadership. So tell us, you were talking about where we're from and where we live. You're actually from New Zealand and you live in Australia now. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes. I was born in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and grew up there and did my training there, and specialised as a occupational therapist in neuro rehab. And so I did that for nearly 3 decades, actually, and then I moved into education and research, moved over to Australia to do my PhD, and from there have launched into coaching and training women leaders, and we also have about 20% of male leaders as well, coaching and training leaders in authentic leadership. So it's sort of a little bit of a morph from country to country, and throughout my journey, I've always been in that sort of position of encouraging and empowering and coaching people to tap into their strengths and just basically be who they really are on the inside, not be what they think they should be. That's where I come from.
I love that. I sense a little bit of maybe criticism is too harsh a word or too strong, but a little bit of opinion on the word should, and the sort of conditioning or perhaps expectations that are put on us to be a certain type. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so we actually, in what we do, we talk about supercharging our language. So that's one of the words that we encourage people to get rid of in their vocabulary, because as soon as you do the should, you're either judging yourself or putting a judgment on other people, or having that whole internal external conflict of, oh, but I should be doing that, but it doesn't feel right for me, or I really want to do this, but I think I should do that because they said this. And so there's a lot of that sort of negative firing of judgment that comes with that word. So should is one of those words that we go should, and then we throw it out the window, because otherwise you go should do this, should do this, should do this. You're shoulding all over yourself. And within that, you're judging, first of all, yourself, and then you're judging other people, and you're buying into that external frame of what they think is better than what I believe about myself, or what I need to do, or what I get to do.
That is such a wonderful explanation and summary of the impact that that word can have, or the indirect outcome that we're really looking for. I often will describe should as a nebulous word for my team because, similar to your point, it is expressing an expectation that may or may not have been even communicated to someone. And so I consider it quite a dicey word to use. I love how you describe it though, in terms of how we think we should be or what is expected of us as leaders, as people, just, humans in general. So I'm curious, how did you come to that understanding? Is it something that you had to go through in a journey of your own self awareness, or is that something that came from your coaching?
It absolutely came through from my own experience of always wanting to people please, always wanting to keep the peace. I'm the youngest of 9 children, and so I sort of saw my thing as just sort of going around the edges and not rocking the boat and trying to fit in. Literally, trying's another one of those words we can throw out the window because you either do or do not do. But I was trying, as in putting myself inside out, thinking I needed to be this type of person to fit in. And I took that through from my childhood into my adult years, into my work life, into my career, and it tied me up in knots. Absolutely. So definitely through my own experience, and also through what we know now around neuroscience and the way that every word has like an emotional charge, and a word and a thought, whether we say it or do we just think it, has an emotional charge. We know this. It releases chemical reaction. And that chemical reaction from that word comes down into our body and in our cells, and we interpret that as a feeling or an emotion. And then we create an action from that. So if we're wanting to sort of set ourselves up and be empowered, if we're wanting to be authentically who we're being and who we are every day and show up as our authentic leader that we can be, then recognizing those thoughts, recognizing those words, and what that ripple effect is around that emotional charge, because you have that base, you literally have that neurotransmitter, that electric impulse that flings off your chemicals and reactions, goes into your body, floods your cells, floods your muscles, floods your bloodstream, all of that. Then it sends off all those hormones that release those things like, stress hormone, cortisol, adrenaline. And if we do that and we're not recognizing right at the beginning what we're thinking and what we're saying to ourselves, then we can keep in staying stuck in that mode of stress.
Wow. That is really incredible when you think about it too, because everything you just described is sort of, like the system of it all. It happens so quickly when you think about, it's just we can just throw words around so easily and quickly without sometimes that second thought of it. And the impact is far greater than I would even have expected on our physical being, let alone the sort of mental anguish that we go through when we have those conversations with ourselves or others.
Mm, absolutely. It all starts, it's thought equals emotions equals actions. And so we have that cycle that keeps going. And so recognizing the self-talk that comes up is the first step. And noticing it and coming back to that word, as we said, should, throwing it out the window. We notice it, and we do that without blame or shame or guilt or judgment, because it is how it is. It's just a pattern. There's nothing wrong with us. We're not bad or terrible or doing a disgusting job or failing at something. It just is what it is, because it's our patterns that have been developed over life. And when we recognize that, we allow ourselves the grace, we allow ourselves the acceptance to go, oh, I just beat myself up again. I just said, you can't do that. That's stupid. Why are you doing that for? You know that you can't do that. Just stop even bothering. And, you're such a failure. Why do that? We talk to ourselves in the most terrible ways. And as my co-founder Christine talks about frequently, it was like, you wouldn't say that to your best friend. So why are we saying it to ourselves? And the language is where it starts. It's huge. It's all about how we show up, how we lead ourselves, and how we can be leaders to our teams, our organizations, and also within the world.
That idea of self-awareness is so important. I talk about that with a lot of guests. It always comes up, and how it really does start with us, and we have to recognize that before we can then take care of other people in our responsibility as a leader. And I'm curious, at the same time, it might sound easier said than done to have that self-awareness. So, do you help coach people to build up that awareness of when they're using those negative words, when they're falling into that pattern again, or are they coming to you having already had that epiphany, that realization of like, I've got to get out of this rut, this cycle?
A little bit of both. Some of the first things that we do with people is we begin to get them to notice, because without that self-awareness, we can't actually be authentic leaders. So self-awareness is one of the four basic things that are so important in authentic leadership. And so being aware of what I am saying, feeling, doing is the first step. And so we do this all the time. We do it in fun ways when we're on coaching calls and things. It was like, whoop, hang on, there's that word again. And so we disrupt, because when you disrupt, it comes into your RAS, your reticular activating system. So it's part of your brain that goes, oh, I need to focus on this, because we just do it because it's just part of a normal unconscious pattern. And so what we do is we bring that into your conscious awareness. And so that's the first stage. And anybody can do this. Anybody listening can do this. It can be like, don't use universals like always, never. Because nobody always, 100% of the time, and 100% of every single situation, every single time of the day, no one 100% of the time does a certain something. So it's not always. No one never does something. They might do it to some degree. They might do it over here. They might do it over there. You might just not see it. And so first of all, we throw out universals. Let's not say always and never. It might be sometimes, it might be more frequently, it might be whatever. And so recognizing these things, these words that trip us up, because if we're a leader and we go in here and going, you're always late for work, and the person was only late for work 5 out of 7 times, then you've instantly broken that trust, busted that trust between you and that person and your team. Because it's like, well, you didn't notice the 2 times I was on time. And so what it does is it sets ourselves up for having discordant teams. It sets ourselves up for having broken relationships and lack of trust. So the noticing and self-awareness is the first thing. And people will be answering questions or conversing about a certain topic that we're teaching or training on. It was like, ah, there's that word again. And they go, oh, did I say it again? Oh, I didn't even realize. And so we just keep interrupting the pattern. Remember, it's a pattern. Keep interrupting the pattern, and then they begin to focus on that, and they choose and practice and begin to build a different habit because of that. And that's the beginning stages of self-awareness and noticing without that shame, blame, guilt, or judgment of self or anyone else. No one else made you get angry. No one else made you lose your cool in the team. That's your chosen reaction. They might have said something and blah, blah, blah that you reacted to. And remember, you reacted to it. So those things are your choices. And coming back to being aware of that, you step it back and go, so what triggered that reaction when I got angry at that person this morning? Ah, well, actually, I hadn't eaten. I was telling myself this. I had just come off a conversation with someone where I thought that I'd done a terrible job, blah, 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 blah. And so you stack up what's happened and you recognize what's happened without the self judgment. And then you can go, okay, I'm going to choose a different pattern. And then you practice it and you keep practicing it. And then what happens, you rewire your neurons in a different way because you're noticing it, you're feeling it, you're recognizing it, you're practicing it, and you keep on going and you rebuild a different pattern.
It sounds like, well, when I think about self-awareness, my default is to think about it from an awareness of behavior and perception. And you're taking it much deeper from the understanding that self-awareness is also getting to the root, perhaps, of our own internal thoughts, feelings, and to your point, that trigger, whatever triggered it, and recognizing, and tell me if I'm off course here, but recognizing that there could be other things that are affecting me that I'm not giving awareness to, and that's
Mm.
why
It
I'm feeling a certain way. Is that on track?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Because 'cause we're the sort of outcome of what's happening around us as well. And it's not saying that because I haven't eaten and I didn't sleep well and I have a pain in my hip and the room's really hot or really cold and that person who's sitting opposite me in the team meeting barreled me last week for something I didn't finish on time, blah 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 blah. These can be facts. These can be facts and situations. It doesn't mean that they need to determine what you do next. However, in noticing them, you're giving credence to them, and then you can consciously choose what meaning you give to them. Because if you come into something and you go, "Oh, I didn't sleep last night," and everybody cops it, and you're grumpy and you're agitated and you sort of bark at people orders and you're not very accommodating to people and you're just really quick at what you do and send back sort of slightly terse emails, what's that going to do for your team? And what's it going to do for you? So the first part of that is calling it as is because we can't pretend it's not like that. Okay. So many people go, oh, well, I just have to be positive and switch that off, compartmentalize, blah, 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 jump into this and pretend everything's okay. No, that doesn't work. That's not being authentic either. What we can get to do, what we get to do is to recognize where we're at because we have that high level of self-awareness. I was like, okay, I'm a little bit this, didn't have that, got this yesterday, had this meeting just before. I'm feeling a little bit under the pressure. I'm being very productive today. I haven't had time to have my full lunch or walk outside, which I usually do. And then I'm just going to choose to just go, because in that moment, I can choose to take that with me to my next meeting or interaction, or I can choose to let it go because I've validated it, I've recognized it, I've honored it, and then I set myself up for what I'm going to do next.
It sounds like a real empowerment of self because you're not allowing those external and perhaps internal things that are happening too, but whatever it is affecting you, you're not letting it control your next actions in a way that you're the victim to it, but you're reclaiming that drive.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It was like, it is that. It totally is that. You're reclaiming it. You're reclaiming your own power. And that's what authentic leadership is about. It starts here. It starts with you reclaiming your power. Now, this is not about arrogance and ego and about being a director or a dictator. That is not authentic leadership. It's coming back to knowing who you are, knowing what flips your switch, what spins your wheels, what floats your boat, whatever other analogy you want to say. It's knowing what gets you into that amazing mode of being in the flow, of firing on all cylinders, on being creative and innovative. It's understanding what you do and who you be to set yourself up for that. And I get to choose that. I get to choose that whether it's a 6 a.m. in the morning meeting, whether it's a 10 p.m. at night interaction with someone. I get to choose that. Nobody else, I do. And recognizing that and having the tools and being able to practice that. 10 years ago, I was not like this. 10 years ago, I was one of, well, probably not 10 years ago, 16, 17 years ago. I was one of those people who, as I said at the beginning, I always thought I had to please other people. I was doing for them and doing for this and doing over here and doing over there. And I ended up in a massive big hole. I ended up with incredible depression and burnout, where for 3 months I couldn't even get out of bed. And I couldn't even look after myself in any way. I needed assistance to shower myself, and I could barely even talk. And throughout that time and the months and the years of recovery, I recognized that I could put something in place. I could take my own power back. I could learn the tools and the skills to be able to recognize who I am. I gave myself permission to ask for things. I gave myself permission to ask for help and recognized and understood that these things are signs of strength and leadership and the ability to empower myself first and then to empower others.
As I'm listening to this, you have me inspired so much, Elizabeth. I have to ask, how was that feeling of transformation for you when you got over that great hurdle? And I'm sure it was not overnight. I'm sure there must have been some kind of lengthy journey there. Um, so yeah, I'm curious, what was that feeling once you got through that challenge?
So I remember at one stage, I was seeing a psychologist, and as you may sort of guess, I'm sort of a bit of one of those type A personalities who love to get involved with things, high level productivity, innovator, creator, high level producer. I love being inspired and working on things, problem solving things and opportunities. I love all that side of things. And I remember at one stage she said to me, "Oh, so you're applying your A type personality to your recovery." And in that moment, I was only a few months through my initial recovery, so I was still pretty rocky. And I remember thinking, "Oh, how dare you?" And then I went, "Oh, this is freaking awesome. I can bring that over here and I can recover." And so I remember that moment of transformation really powerfully and strongly. That was nearly 2 decades ago. And it was that time when it was like, I get to apply all the things I know over here and in my career. And I was just sort of in part of the top areas of my career in New Zealand in occupational therapy, and I was a president of the association and involved in all sorts of things and research at that time. And it was like, I get to bring all that into me. I get to transfer all those skills from work into me. And I get to, didn't have to, but I chose to take that journey step by step. Yes, it was a long journey. I can say it was about 9 and a bit years before I got to that stage. It was like, I'm never having medication again for this. And I haven't. And for me, that was another amazing, empowering moment where it was like, I get to choose my state of mind. I get to choose how I respond to things. I have control of my life, not somebody out there. And that was just the most amazing moment. And I've had many moments like that over the last decade or so as well. It was just like, oh, I get to choose this. Now, it doesn't mean that I don't have adversity. Absolutely not. Lots of times of adversity. 6 months after I got remarried, I my partner was diagnosed with cancer. And so we went through that journey together for 2 years. And it was like, ah, crap. And I learned to bring all those things that I'd learned previously through to that. We would park the car and walk into the cancer centre where she's going for her treatment. And we set ourselves up just like we do for leadership. It was like, right, today, this is how it is. We'd often have little cries together first, and then it was like, right, we're going in there and we're going to connect with people. We're going to be honest and open, and we're going to be joy germs. And I love that term. So we chose to be joy germs, and we would go in there and we would bring sunshine and honesty and light and humor and connection to anybody that was in there. And we had the best of 6 weeks. It was amazing. It really, really was. Yes, there was moments of desperation and teariness and honesty because we called it as is. And we chose also not to get stuck in that.
You have me on the edge of my seat. I'm leaning in. For those that are just listening, uh, I know you can hear Elizabeth's just powerful joy and passion for everything you're talking about. Because Elizabeth, I hear that in you. I have no doubt that it must have been a terrible journey of struggle and, there must have been some frustration there, and at the same time, hearing how you had so much joy through the ups and downs, and the fact that you were able to gather together as a couple, and then now you can do that with other people. It is really powerful and so exciting to be a part of. So, how does that feel when you see other people go through that same kind or similar kind of transformation?
Oh, it's amazing. It really is. That's why I do what I do. I've worked with so many people all around the world at all different levels in their organizations, at all different levels in their life, different ages. And the most exciting thing is when I have like a one-on-one coaching session with someone. We do them for 30 minutes, so it's short, sharp, get to the point, get the result, move on. And within that, when somebody has one of those, and it happens nearly every time. It's just the way we do it. The one of those, so it's this, and then they do that, and then they come back to the next session, and they always have homework, actions. Knowledge without action is just total waste of time. So they always put things into place and action it and begin practicing and building the next muscle, the next pattern, the next habit. They begin strengthening that muscle as they go forward. And they come back the next time and in their pre-form they've gone, this happened and that happened and this was the effect of that, and it's so cool because the team is now doing this, or I'm doing this, or I'm not doing that. I never thought I could do that. And just every time somebody does that, they're taking one little more piece of control of themselves. They're recognizing and stepping into their truth. And that's what authentic leadership is about. It's not about the change management models. It's not about this style or that style. All of that can help. But if you don't know who you are, and if you don't recognize your authentic self within that, then you keep trying to do it the way other people will do it. You keep trying to fit into this box or do it like that. We've worked with so many people who said, as a woman, I thought I had to lead like a man because that's what who had the most success 10, 15 years ago. And it was like, I'm just recognizing that I can do it my way. We had other people who we're coaching and training through in different corporate workshops and things, and they went, I always thought I had to be the rah rah person out the front because that's what a leader looks like and sounds like. And so we were able to show them that you can lead from behind and you can be a servant leader from behind. And so within that it's that whole excitement of transformation. It absolutely is transformation. It spins my wheels. It's why I do what I do. And it's not because of what I do, it's the person. The person has to do it as well because I can speak, I can inspire, I can be on as many training programs or coaching calls with a person and they can still choose to stay where they are. So it is absolutely up to every single one of you to take that little tiny tweak forward and the next little tiny tweak and the next little tiny tweak. And over a year, you're in a totally different place.
It makes a lot of sense. Otherwise, if we aren't investing in the action steps, then we don't have the agency and we're not going to get to that authenticity. And then we're trapped in that same cycle, same pattern that you're describing. And to your point, you can't do that for other people. And at the same time, I imagine that because you have your own story of overcoming adversity and that lengthy journey, still harnessing the joy and the passion, I can only imagine that people are inspired by that to put in the work because they can see that you have overcome and you are embracing who you are. And how powerful is that? The story that you can share and bring to others. I hope that our audience is listening and can take energy and encouragement from that because I'm sitting here and I'm ready to think, all right, what am I
It's like,
working on now?
let's go.
For me, it's nighttime, but I'm ready to go. Might as well do that. Yeah. Um, that was just wonderful. And well, this is a good segue because you started to mention the difference between um men and women leaders and how for a lot of women perhaps or at least a significant amount of us who did have perhaps male leaders or were taught to be a certain way in the traditional sense of what a leader is, that feels like it might be a pattern that we have to constantly chip away at and disrupt. So I'm
Mm.
curious, what are your thoughts on that? How do you approach the different types of leaders from a male female perspective?
Yeah, we all one of the things that's really important, we all have masculine and feminine energy within us, which is first and foremost really important to recognize. It's not just the whole gender thing. And so often people just say, oh, because they're a male, they do this. And the other one goes, because they're a female, they do that. I've had terrible male leaders and terrible female leaders. I've had terrible, I mean, I've had good. Well, that was terrible. The other side. I've had good male leaders and I've had great female leaders. I've had both. And so it's not just the gender thing that it comes down to. A lot of it, I think, is about those patterns and the lack of self-awareness to start with. That our patterns become unconscious patterns. And when we're working for someone, regardless of what gender they are, when we're working with someone who is always sort of directive in what they do, or they might micromanage certain things, or they might favor someone over the rest of the team, or they might not share information and leave you really confused in what you're doing or what you're not doing. Whenever you're working with, like the podcast says, bad bosses, whenever you're working with bad bosses, I get to choose still who I show up as. First and foremost, I get to choose if I go to work or not, or find another job. Yeah, that's an obvious thing. And within that, I get to choose who I show up as. Now I can show up as a passive, scared, unsure yes person, or I can show up as my true self. And that for me is different for you, Rebecca, and different for every single one of the listeners here. So when I had a situation where I was working with someone who was we would call them a tyrant, and she was actually a female, I got into that whole pattern of sort of being on eggshells, always constantly second guessing myself, not sure what I should share or not share, wanting to always take another person with a meeting because the person would ambush you and say things and get you off kilter, and then it was like, oh my gosh, and what happens then? And for me at that moment, when I was in that stage of my life, I would then often end up in tears of frustration because I was so angry. I didn't know what to do with that. And then I turned all that anger and frustration in, and that wouldn't help either. And so coming through that, what we teach and what we train now is absolutely about that. It was like, if I don't set a boundary for me, then I will allow that person to do whatever, because I'm actually saying they control me. And so when we work with people, regardless of gender, when we work with people who are in a situation like this, it's not saying it's all my fault. It's not saying it's all their fault. It's nothing to do with fault or blame. It's saying, how do I show up? I'm responsible for how I show up. I'm not responsible for any trauma or what happens to me, but I'm responsible for my response to it. That's my responsibility. And I can choose to step into that responsibility and accountability and ownership of that. Or I can choose to stay, like you said before, in victim mode and allow them all the power. And again, we don't do this by teaching people to go in and create anarchy within organizations and picket fences and all the rest of it. It may come to that for some people, but that's not where we go. We encourage people to recognize, what are the automatic patterns that are coming up here? If this person is saying this or doing this, what do I then think of myself in my head? What am I saying to myself? What am I saying to other people? How am I coming across? And so again, it comes back to that self-awareness of me. I can't change that person. However, If the normal pattern is they do this and they say that and I do this, and they say that and I do this, and then we end up with this to and fro and this explosion in the middle. If I change my response, they came in and I'm like this, and they go, huh. They come in and I go like this. They come in, I go like this. They'll go and find a different response. Sometimes they actually go and find a different person to pick on, which isn't healthy either. However, it's not you anymore. And then you can help strengthen yourself and then help create the others in your team ways at which to step into a more authentic way of being a team member, which again takes your power back. We so often give our power away to that tyrant, to that boss that we call a bad boss, to the toxic environment. And there are times when absolutely, it's like, do you believe that you deserve more than this toxic environment? Why are you staying to fight it? I know somebody who stayed to fight it and they believed 100% of the time that it was about their ego. Looking back, it was their ego that just wanted to stay and fight because they basically believed I was right, they were wrong, I'm going to show them. And they stayed there so long, their body ended up taking them out and they ended up with a cancer diagnosis as well. Because their body went, this is toxic. And so they created toxicity within their bodies. And they recognized throughout that journey, sort of 5 years later, 3, 4, 5 years later, I was like, I believe that because I wanted to stay and have that fight because I thought I was right, rather than saying, I'm choosing to take my power back, I'm choosing to leave and get another job, find something else, create something else. And so that's open to us for all of our opportunities to do that. We get to choose that.
That really is such wonderful advice, and you touch enough on the nuance of it too, because anyone that is in a toxic situation where it is unhealthy or to the point something terrible like developing cancer, you have to be able to get yourself out of that situation. And to your point, having that awareness and getting to that, I can imagine it's very challenging for someone who is stuck in a certain mindset, and how freeing it must be to get out of that, or at the very least, depending on what that situation is, being able to recognize it and put up those boundaries, which is I just hear from others how hard it can be to put up a boundary, but so important because, something that I was talking to another guest about, Nicole Perry, and she was sharing how boundaries are a way of taking care of ourselves, and it's a very proactive way of doing that. So I love that you tie into that agency over a situation that you're not responsible for. You're not responsible for that other person's actions, but you can take that agency back for yourself and your own health. It's just a really powerful reminder for anyone who is feeling stuck. There are ways to break out of that. And so I'm so glad you share that. Um, it makes me think too, when you are stuck in a situation with a toxic boss, or maybe it's a group of people, not only the toll that it can take on your body, but also that internal struggle of self-doubt and self-worth. Do you ever help coach people through that doubtful phase of, am I even worth what I am supposed to be, and what I'm doing? Can I even make it in my industry or in this world? I wonder how much do people get beaten down by that?
Yeah, a lot of the time, yes. It's something I actually do a keynote speech on as well, is that over 70% of people have experienced those feelings of self-doubt in their life at some stage, and it can be in any area of their lives as well. And just coming back to your point before I go back to that one, coming back to your point about boundaries, we see boundaries, that boundaries are there to enhance. They're not there to restrict or constrict. So often people think, okay, a boundary is like the law and the rule, and it has this little tight thing around it, and I can't do that because I want to be flexible, or I'm not that sort of person. I don't want to offend anybody, and all of this type of thing. And so coming back to self-belief and self-worth, we would ask this wonderful, wonderful coaching question, giving a secret away here. we, we would ask, what's behind that? So it was like, oh, I can't put a boundary in for, and sometimes it's people around their family members. It was like, oh no, I have to do that because they asked me to, and they're my family, so I have to. And so it was like, so what would it take to put a boundary in around doing that once a week instead of 6 times a week? Oh, I can't do that. And so what's behind that? Because it comes back to a belief. And then we ask again, and they say something, what's behind that? And they go, blah, 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 blah. And that's all your conscious, logical mind. It's just giving all these answers that it thinks is right. And then what's behind that? And what's behind that? And we often go back 4 or 5 sort of levels. And then they go, because I can't do that, because then they won't like me. Or something will come out like, well, I can't do that because then I won't be good enough for doing what I want to do. And so we get back to the underlying belief, and there's usually around 6 beliefs that underlie everything. And it's not good or bad, right or wrong. It just is. We're humans. This is what happens. This is what our lives have created. And it was like our patterns that have created over time. They're not right or wrong, good or bad. They just are. And so within that, we then go into the whole thing of creating that self-belief. Because again, comes back to that mindset. If I just say, I'm calm, I'm calm, I'm calm, and your body's feeling so stressed and tuned up, and all your chemicals are firing off, and it's like your hands are sweaty and your stomach's churning, and it was like, oh, and you can't breathe properly because you've got this, I'm calm. And your head's telling you you're calm, your body's saying, that's a load of BS. No, it ain't. And that's why positive thought thinking and positive affirmations on their own do not work. And so bringing all these things together, it's about, what are you telling yourself? What are you actually feeling in your body? What is that congruence between head and heart? Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about this really strongly. When we have head and heart congruence, our body feels and believes it can do it. So this comes down to self-belief. This comes down to self-worth. It comes down to knowing from your fiber, right down in here. This is where your self-belief fits. It's below your rib cage and above your belly button. That's where your self-belief sits within your body. And that's why when you don't believe that you can do it, often people feel that tuning just there, just below your rib cage and above your belly button. And so when you recognize this and you train this to grow and strengthen, and you are actually training the neural synapses and the neural rewiring of, when I say I believe in myself, I feel it. I believe it. I am it. And when you do that, then people do amazing things with whatever. Their careers take off. They get promoted left, right, and centre. Opportunities open up that they never even thought possible. And when we go back to them and they come back to us in a year's time or 6 months' time, or we keep working with them over time, 3, 4, 5 years, it's like, wow, look where you are now and look where you were then. Working with a corporate group of leaders in the city, where we're doing a 12-month program with them and a mixture of trainings and coachings. And even within the 3 months of the beginning of the things, people were saying, oh my gosh, because we asked things like, would you do this before? I had one person, I was like, she put in a boundary. She's been working in this organization for over 27 years. And she went on holiday over the Christmas break, and she turned off her notifications, and she had an out of office notice on her computer. She has never done that before. And it's like, yes, it's a little thing. However, what was behind that? What was behind that? She believed she had to be a beck and call of everybody else, otherwise she wasn't a good leader. Because if she didn't please them, then she wasn't a good person. Just to belief. It's not right or wrong, good or bad, just is. And so once we recognize that and we work on that and we shift that, because I can shift it within about 2 minutes, we can shift that neural pathway. When we do that, people step into their authentic power and they become unstoppable.
That is so cool, and I can't even imagine what it's like to witness that in other people, but I I want to make sure that people can have a chance to either experience that with you or experience that in a group or learn from you so that they can help other people do that because that is a real gift that you have, Elizabeth, being able to help people get through that. Everything you're describing, it sounds like it's a lot of work for us as individuals that we have to put in that work, but so much reward is at the end of it if we can put in that work and recognize the great transformation that lies before us. So, all of that said, how can people reach out to you? Where would you like them to connect with you so they can learn more about all of the great things that you can do and help support them in?
Fantastic. We would love to work with people who are ready to take action. And remember, it doesn't have to be hard. That's another thing. It's like, it doesn't have to be hard. If we decide it's easy and it's simple and it goes with flow, then we focus on ease and flow and simplicity. And so that's another thing that we sort of teach and train people. It's awesome because it's one tiny tweak at a time. It's not changing everything at once because it's too big, too huge. Nobody will do it and it will never stick. I was like, nah, we don't do that. So getting in touch with me and my colleagues and my team, it is Walt Institute. So it's WALT, and that stands for Women Authentic Leadership Training Institute.com. Hit our website, you'll find everything you need to know there. You'll find some testimonials, you'll find our contacts, you'll find some free resources on there. And we would love to get to know you. We coach and train people all around the world. The internet technology is amazing. We connect at different times of the day and the evenings. And so we would love to work with people who really want to bust through these things and absolutely step into their authentic leadership power. Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you, Elizabeth, so much for being my guest and for sharing all of your wonderful insights and wisdom. Most importantly, your story, too, because that's really what helps us all connect together. And you're a great testament to all of the work that you are doing, just for the fact that you're able to share your own journey of overcoming that adversity. And I'm really grateful for that. I know our audience is too. You even given me a small mind shift there, a set shift there, because now I'm thinking about how easy it can be to make those changes when you have that alignment. And so now I'm in that mindset shift, and I want to make sure that everybody else has that chance to connect with you. So we'll have your information down below. Please, everybody, feel free to click the link and follow along with Elizabeth and her journey and all the wonderful things that she's doing in this world. Elizabeth, thank you again. And thank you all for listening in to another episode of Bad Bosses, Great Leaders podcast.